Hey everyone. This is a breakdown of three often underemphasized extremes of gaming and game design. The reason I decided to do this is because I brought up Skinner box design to describe gaming in a very broad sense in my last video. But in reality, there is a lot more going on than just that. Throughout my gaming life, I have often seen people talk about the symptoms but not the cause when making complaints about how a game plays. When I say this, I mean the symptoms like I logged on and never talked to another person, ran 5 dungeons and logged off. This game has no community. Or there needs to be some kind of ELO metric for this game, or new players are just going to give up. Or, fuck this, everyone who plays this game are taking it way too seriously. Chances are you have heard these complaints before in one of your favorite games. These complaints are often tied directly to how the game is designed on a base level. I also see people assume that because a game fits a certain genre or style, that it will immediately be what they want, when in actuality, the game can actually be something completely different. My goal here isn't to say that any of these three styles of play are objectively better than any other, but I believe that a lot of people have yet to click in their minds what exactly is going on under the hood when they pick what games they tend to enjoy. For example, Black Desert Online is an open world sandbox game. That means that must mean that political discourses such as EVE Online would be something you can expect, right? In reality, Black Desert Online is a PvP-centric Skinner box where you barely need to talk to anyone for any reason at all to enjoy the game. In fact, many aspects of the game's economy have been hit with solutions so over the top I cannot describe it as anything less than shotgun surgery. All items have set prices on the auction house. Players cannot directly trade goods. Another example would be how World of Warcraft was a game that was more bound in politics at its height in the Burning Crusade era and Wrath, but has become more of a Skinner box, much to the dismay of its fans who enjoyed those aspects of the game. Recreation is not on this list, and I'm sure there are a few other things that exist as well. Recreation would talk about building your dream home in Minecraft or some kind of super project. These are the three main things that I think both players and devs tend to incorrectly assess. This is for both design and choosing a game you might enjoy. I draw this diagram out as a triangle because I think that games tend to be a gradient of these three categories I have listed. In other words, none of these things are mutually exclusive. Take note of the A and B and C markers to signify a game that sits somewhere between the two extreme categories. Most games sit somewhere closer to the center of this diagram. What I want to discuss is what happens when a game goes too far in any of these directions. Skinner box game design. Skinner box games tend to be linear progression, where you constantly collect rewards for doing things in a preset environment. In fact, developers will often use the term progression as a code word for rewarding the player with various trinkets, experience points, unlocks, achievements, bars that fill up, numbers that get bigger. Even in games that are not viewed as needing progression, will often have progression added in. Skinner box design is providing a feeling of getting stronger and improving constantly. This is the simplest way to get a lot of people addicted to your game. For the most part, this progression is an illusion as well. Surprisingly, this is even true in games such as Diablo 3, where you would think getting stronger is very much not an illusion. In reality, a mob of equal level always takes roughly the same number of hits to dispatch, whether you are level 1 or level 60. I am in no way saying that Skinner box design is a bad thing. In fact, it's actually really amazing when done very well. Even so, I have had many discussions with people that think Skinner box game design is predatory or immoral, and in many ways, especially when it comes to microtransactions. I don't personally feel that it is inherently evil, pretty much in the same way that gambling isn't inherently evil. But even with that said, Skinner Box design barely holds a candle to the moral implications of political game design, which I will go into later. And believe me, political game design is a doozy. Game developers lean heavily in the direction of Skinner Box game design for various reasons. Not all of these reasons are because of game developers either. For example, players always tend to want a feeling of getting something done even when they have limited time and resources to play a game. What happens on this front is something I might describe as a slow chip damage towards the both personal skill and politics in game design. Personal skill and politics are actually viewed as obstacles to just having fun. Any game that has a long-standing community and a developer who wishes to abide by the whims of its people in a sort of democratic process will likely make a slow march towards Skinner Box game design. I tend to feel like the longer an MMO lives, the more it becomes a Skinner Box. On top of that, another contributing aspect of this march towards Skinner Box design is the current day economic climate that dictates a growth mindset. Like it or not, game development studios beholden to the interest of investors, and by that are corporations that will be forced into a growth mindset. Without constant growth, even incredible profits are seen as failure. It sounds really strange. If you want to learn more, Google Scorched Earth Economics. It's not directly related, but it's close. Big companies buy smaller companies, then put those companies under a microscope, and if they don't produce the numbers they want, it places greater pressure on them to perform. It's an ugly, entangled topic. Skinner boxes are often the go-to solution and harness the largest audience possible with a growth mindset because anything else will be viewed as taking a risk. This can ultimately create a bubble that can eventually burst, but this is rare. This is a rare situation overall, as there are few examples out there where a game based solely on personal skill like Quake 3 Arena or games based are based on political discourse like EVE Online are forced into a growth mindset. Doom 4 typically complaints of games that go too far into the direction of Skinner Box design are synonymous with the treadmill. People will say that there is no sense of community. People will say that the game rewards those who lack personal skill or determination. You will often hear people say that the game was fun, but at first, it became empty or too grindy after a while. You might have heard somebody say this game is fun, but it can never be an esport. That happens a lot. If you don't like grindy games, then X game is not for you. Well, you've probably heard that, right? Very, very common when quality Skinner Box games come into play. So now we are at personal skill as a means of deriving enjoyment from a game. Games where everything is based on personal skill or team coordination bring forth a very different perspective. Players cannot gain a feeling of progression through the game itself. Your progression relies solely on how much you learn about the game and your own ability to play the game to be successful. This means that a huge swath of your audience will likely experience a barren wasteland of progress. Having to place huge effort in an attempt to even know what it even means to be better is a huge obstacle. It's like a series of obstacles. If the game doesn't explicitly state you are getting better with an experience point bar, then a lot of people will think the game lacks depth, when in reality, the opposite is true. They will say the game has nothing to really do when it has everything to do, but it doesn't feel that way. Likewise, players who do click on this and put effort into getting better at the game will create, in a sense, their own Skinner box. Okay, and I have overused the term. Guilty as charged. I will stop using it. Everyone is different Everyone is different. Everyone derives enjoyment from different things. But in the end, for the most part, it will be unlikely for the vast majority of people to gain a feeling of progress until they actually are able to do something tangible, like beating that boss after 200 tries, or finally beating a player of equal skill in measured combat. When it happens, that high is incredibly potent, but sadly, it's unlikely that the vast majority of gamers will actually experience this high. A game based solely on this aspect will typically have a very small audience as a result. Game developers are typically afraid of going too far in this direction, yet it is an essential aspect of gaming for it to have any kind of community. These people will be viewed as the core audience, or the hardcore players. Hardcore players are essential for a game. If they don't exist, it is a red flag that your game has gone too far into the realm of Skinner box design, or probably something else. Not to say that Skinner box games won't have a core audience either. People have turned degenerative strategy into a sort of masochistic art. It's quite amazing, actually, I must say. So with that, we can mention the hybrid solution. The hybrid solution for this situation has emerged in the early 2000s. It's hardly a new topic by any means. One of the best examples of this I have ever seen was Call of Duty Modern Warfare, or COD 4. While COD 4 is very likely not the first example of this, it is the first one I think that really changed how competitive multiplayer would flow for years after. It combined personal skill with constant rewards for players of all skill ranges. Even poorly skilled players would eventually be able to unlock all of the game's rewards. Every match would provide everyone with something for their efforts. So these days, it's very common practice to provide players with experience points and loot boxes. Loot boxes are an amazing thing because it almost literally a form of gambling built into a reward. Getting a loot box is high, and opening the box is like playing blackjack. It's really interesting. I imagine if we were able to warp 40 years into the future, Skinner box games would be so potent in design that the average person of today would be rendered helpless in a full drop virtual reality sex orgy with goddesses every time they open a treasure chest. To quote Illidan from World of Warcraft, "You are not prepared," because I am almost positive that not one of us actually would be. Not to mention that copulation as a reward for in-game events would be a very strange topic. Anyway, the problem with Call of Duty progression. Call of Duty progression is an interesting nut to crack because they wanted to venture more into the visceral experience of combat and share that experience with as wide of an audience as possible. Players spawn near each other in mechanically unpredictable ways, and time to kill in basic combat had become short enough that pretty much anyone who shoots on sight will have the advantage of winning a skirmish. In addition to that, weapon pickups and basic control mechanics were removed from the levels themselves, negating popular gameplay metas for map control. This was the death throw of the arena shooter. The skill ceiling was greatly lowered, and Skinner box mechanics were added to retain as large an audience as possible. Not to say that the game lacked skill or reward for teamwork, but it is widely accepted that COD 4 had a greater emphasis on skill over future warfare, even just in terms of level design as a whole. COD 4 levels were methodical and had strategic design such as choke points, while newer CODs adopted a "the more connections an area has, the better" approach. And Infinite Warfare, everyone has become a spaceship. So yeah, in outer space, no one can hear a choke point scream. At this point, it has just gone to a comedic extreme.